All right, let's get started. Sure, we'll jump right into it.
Cool. We have an exciting edition of Lunch with Tom today. We have an activity for to look at. We're actually going to ask for a little bit of your feedback on the school calendar. So I know there's always a lot of interest on the school calendar, so we'll spend a little bit of time doing that. But thank you so much for being here today. I love these times and really appreciate that those of you who come out, who have come out before and continue to come out, and those of you who are new on the call, welcome and thank you for being here. Good to see familiar faces. This is an opportunity for engagement, for me to engage with our community and to engage with staff, with parents, and with members of the public who are interested in our success. It's open to anybody. What we'll do is, and what we've been doing is communicating district updates. So I run through some updates in the beginning, and then we have some open conversations about district-wide issues. So you will be able to have an opportunity to ask questions and put thoughts and ideas out there. And then it's just an opportunity to build relationships and community. I would ask that if you have specific questions about something specific to you or your child, that you reach out to me directly, and I will be responsive. I'm happy to take any questions, concerns, but I would ask that we do those outside of this space. And then today, as I mentioned earlier, we're gonna show you the calendar from this year actually, and just ask you to give us some feedback on what you think the calendar structure feels like, and if you have any ideas for what that could look like moving forward as we head into calendar season. All right, Russ, let's head to the next one. So we set 6 goals with our school board and our cabinet. The cabinet are the directors, executive directors, and principals of the district this summer. And we're in the 5th year of a 5-year strategic plan. And we created 6 goals for this year so that we had measurable goals. These are important goals. They're equity-focused goals, and they're lofty goals that will be hard to meet in a year. So the idea really is to get us kickstarted into how to set goals that we then track and keep on top of and drive towards. So this summer and spring, we're going to be developing a new 5-year strategic plan. As I said, the 5-year one is ending this year, the one that we have, and we'll be moving into next year to building the next 5-year strategic plan starting next school year. So what I'm doing here with everybody and what we've been doing the past couple of weeks, if you're new to the call, is that we are going through each one of these goals, sort of one goal at a time, and just kind of moving through quickly to get a taste and flavor of some of the things that we're thinking about. So the goal that we're going to look at today, it's just one slide, and it's on goal 4. And this is a goal around students successfully graduating from high school, having completed Algebra 2. We chose Algebra 2 as a cabinet. We wanted to look at Algebra 2 because we wanted to make sure we were looking at rigorous courses and math courses. A lot of times math gets forgotten. And we wanted to really look at access. Do all of our students have access to these higher level courses? And are we preparing our students for the higher level courses? There's been more debate about this particular goal than any of the others, because there's always question about why we chose Algebra 2. And so we chose Algebra 2 because there used to be a requirement for NCAA eligibility to take Algebra 2. That requirement doesn't exist anymore, but Algebra 2 still felt like a higher level math class that we wanted to track to see how many students were having access. So interestingly, graduating seniors, 57% complete Algebra 2 at some point. And, but in sort of the equity index that we have for each of these goals, that in our specific and measurable goals, only 26% of seniors who completed Algebra 2 qualified for free and reduced lunch. So we have work to do there in terms of access to rigorous coursework. Not to say that Algebra 2 is the only way that you get rigorous coursework, but it's one that we pulled out as an example. We actually have another goal that also tracks AP access, honors access, and I think that's a little bit richer of a goal, but we can talk about that next time around. So the big updates before we get into talking about the calendar. The first is that our state is, and our Agency of Education is telling us that we are preparing to move from a state of emergency into a recovery state, which is I guess project management language around sort of phases of emergencies, right? So we've been in a state of emergency because of COVID for a year now. And we are going to be moving into this recovery planning timeline. And so the recovery planning actually asks us to think about 3 areas: academic skills, social and emotional learning and well-being, and engagement. So those are great, I think, areas for us to be thinking about. And also, luckily, the ask for us to think about recovery and to plan for recovery comes with funding. And so we learned last week, or maybe the Friday before last, that the district stands to receive $6.7 million between now and to spend between now and 2023 to support those 3 areas. So I've asked our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Stephanie Phillips, to take the lead in this work, and she's pulling together a team. We have to have a team and a coordinator that works closely with the Agency of Education. And this work is really just starting. We just got a toolkit from the Agency of Education last Friday, and we're really digging into sort of what it means, what the requirements for the funding will be, and where we will place our energies. But I was happy to see that, number one, there's funding attached to this work. Number two, it's not short-term work. It's not like we're going to get everyone, 1 million interventions over the summer and then we'll be, back to normal, or that the short-term fixes are going to be the answer, right? I think our team has talked a lot about how this is long and deep work, and it should be aligned to the things that we care about as a city and as a community and as a district. So we're excited to dig in there as a team and with you all. Vaccinations have started for staff, which is just huge. I was really worried about continuing to be able to keep operating our schools and keep them open and keep the safety of our staff and our families intact. We've done a great job. I'm so proud of the work that we've done. And I'm so relieved that vaccines are we're starting to see the vaccines come to our staff. And I'm also excited about the timeline of vaccines for the whole community for 16 and older. I'll be very interested in learning more about the 16 and below as we start to think about the rest of spring and what that will look like and into the fall. We are with this, as it relates to sort of spring and fall, we are hearing some noise, some hints that there may be changes in our guidance that would, and we're hearing that those changes in guidance may relate to the distancing that is required. And so that we just are waiting to see. But as we're waiting, we're also making sure that we're getting ready in case we do need to shift to a guidance that doesn't require 6 feet distancing anymore for students in grades 7 through 12. Next up, the BHS principal search. We had 12 at last count. I think we may be up to 13, 14 candidates who have applied for the BHS principal role. We have a really strong group of candidates who have applied for that position. And so there's a 16-member hiring committee that our Executive Director of Human Resources is leading, along with our principal, Bonnie Johnson-Aiden from Edmonds Elementary School, is also plays another role as a principal liaison and mentor, and she's supporting this hiring process. And so we're feeling very good about this search, the principal search and the hiring process. Again, we have, I think, about 16 members on the hiring committee. We have some central office staff, but we have students, parents, multiple teachers from the high school, and a really well-rounded and diverse group of folks who are going to help us find the next BHS principal. So we're excited for that work. Also very grateful for Interim Principal McBride and her work to make sure that BHS is doing really amazing things right now. COVID recognition, we're gonna take a moment of silence and a moment to reflect tomorrow at 9:45. Is that right, Russ? As a community to pause and to give thanks, to recognize the resilience of our community, and to celebrate a couple of our students who've done some work over this time in expressing and reflecting their experiences and supporting the community through art in their through the pandemic. So we're excited to have this moment where it's for all grades. So we're and actually our BHS students may not watch it, may not see it live because it's as a result of scheduling. So we're gearing it toward our younger students and making it positive and making it about resilience and also recognizing the great efforts that our community has made through this time. So those are the big updates. And now what we want to do is we're going to break you into breakout groups and ask you to look at the calendar. So we're in and then after we do this piece, we'll come back and talk a little bit about the calendar, and then we'll have a good 30 minutes for a conversation for questions and answers. So for next is 0 in there for the 2021-22 calendar. Right now, what we've done is we've essentially sort of looked at those days that there are certain days that the whole region has to take because of the career technical centers. And so we have to manage that. But essentially what we're going to do is show you the calendar from this year and ask you what works, what doesn't work, what you'd like to see change, what you'd like to see stay. And give us that feedback as we're developing the calendar for next year. So Russ, do you want to give some direction here and then do the breakout groups? Great.
Sure. So right now what I have pulled up on my screen, I believe I'm still sharing with you all, is our calendar, but I'm also going to drop it into the chat in case that is just a little bit easier for everyone to see. And so now I'm just going to create some random breakout groups. And what we want to know is, what are your thoughts regarding the calendar? What are some of the things that you like? What are some of the things that you haven't liked? And we're using last year's calendar as a jump off point, or this current year's calendar, I guess I should say. We believe that next year's calendar is going to look a lot like this. So I think you can, if you're like concerned about what next year's will look like, I think you can use this as sort of a guide to your framework. So we'll do that. We'll break out into breakout rooms for maybe 5, maybe 6 minutes. We're going to try to keep it short, and then we'll come out, as Tom said. And then if anyone is open to sharing, we can share as a group, or and then individuals can share out as well. And then I think that will segue nicely into our general question and answer time. So if everybody will give me 1 second, I'm going to make sure I am going to make these groups really quick. Give me a second, please. Okay, have fun.
I stayed on.
It's just me and you, huh?
Yeah, I stayed here.
I wonder if people can still see my screen in a breakout room.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
But you did, you put it in the chat, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And we're recording.
Assign to Nyan Roar. We are in breakout groups looking at last year's calendar. and I'm going to put you in a breakout room that only has 3 people. Nyan Roar may not have left.
Are they?
Hi. You two looked lonely, so I hopped out of an empty room and just figured I'd come hang out. So
Yeah. So our kids are in different spots. Our experiences in different spots. I have 2 kids at the high school, and they've been in the Burlington School District since kindergarten. So I've been in the district for a long time. I have to do something with the dog. I'll be right back.
more on that story when I come back. And what about you, Jen?
We were just kind of agreeing that it would have been nice if our kids had more time in school, less time. Well, I don't know what Kate's kids are doing, but my son's just kind of in his room all day on these off days. And, you know, the last year has been a lot of that. It's been super depressing I think for almost every family. It's probably looked like that. So
yeah, for sure.
That gets me really riled up. And
yeah. And that's specifically related to more the COVID side of things than the calendar, right?
The calendar, right. But then we were kind of saying like, gosh, more time. Like we just had winter break and now we're having spring break and then off for parent-teacher conferences. And I think Kate's kids are having even less time in school than mine, if I understand right.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, and I can say this, I'm happy to say this to the group. COVID times aside, like this is hopefully an aberration, but my experience over time is that I love talking to the teachers always makes me feel better. I really don't like half days. I think the district should eliminate half days. That would be my number one. It's hard on parents. It's not useful for kids. And I think it's a recent addition that we have to the fall parent conferences and the spring parent conferences. I think in middle school you were invited to spring conferences if there was anything that you needed to discuss, which is great. That should happen, but I don't know about the days off related to it. It feels like a lot. I don't know how the district counts it, but
yeah. This year, actually, they did away with the spring conferences.
We don't have school. Our kids don't have school Thursday, Friday.
Oh, sorry. At middle school, they did away with the spring conference.
They did.
Yeah.
I don't actually remember the high school having it last year, having parent-teacher conferences in the spring last year.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But I think that's a good thing to bring up with the group.
Yeah. And actually now I'm thinking about it, and I think maybe they did it this year because we had 4 different teachers in the fall. And now we have 4 new teachers for the spring. Maybe that was why.
Right. Right. It's total different course load, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But
that would make
yeah,
sense.
I was a little last week when I saw, I was like, oh my God, they just they just went back and have another week off essentially. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. I need to close the rooms, and
okay.
It's going to give everybody a 60-second warning, but we can keep chatting. Just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
All right.
I think, well, we might not have time to do that now, but I've never understood how the district counts. I know there are requirements, but I've never understood how they plan it, because it still seems like not a lot of instruction time. And some things like maybe parent-teacher conferences count for instruction time, but
they don't.
Okay.
So if your question is what counts as instruction time, I believe we have to go, for it to be counted as a full day, we have to go. So even our half days do count as full days. I think the AOE says you have to go until noon.
Right.
The nice thing about that is Stephanie Phillips, she can't be on for too much longer, but she is the one that helps create the calendar, and she's on. All right, I think everyone is back. Tom, before we jump into, maybe we should have done this at the beginning, and Stephanie, could I put you and Tom on the spot? One question that we had in our group was just like, how do days get counted? So we know that there are so many days that we have to have of instruction time for the AOE. And I'm wondering if you could just give us a quick breakdown. And I know you might have to leave too, so sorry to put you on the spot.
Stephanie, you want to give us an update on calendar and number of days? And I think it's helpful to hear a little bit about the way that we need to collaborate with other districts too.
Yeah. And I think I told them, and I may have been wrong, so I think I told them that we have to go till noon in order for it to count as a day. But I don't know if you want to get that far into the weeds, but I talked about that too.
Sure. So I'll give a little bit of an update. So state statute requires that regional superintendents, and the regions are defined by the AOE, that regional superintendents set a calendar of 175 common days. And the regional makeup is determined by schools that have the same tech center. So in this area, the region of superintendents that would be working with Tom to determine those 175 common days are districts that send students to Burlington and Essex Tech Center. So that's why I know every year it comes up, somebody will ask, like, I live in Middlebury, why is our calendar different from where I work in Burlington? And that's because they are a different region. And so we're required to have 175 common student days. Historically in Burlington, we build a calendar of 177 student days to have 2 days built in to accommodate closures typically due to weather. So state statute says 175 common days, so we work on that. And then we usually add 2 student days for purposes in case we close, because that then gives us the flexibility. As long as we meet those 175 common days in the region, we can decide based on weather when we need to make up the student days. So that's typically the way that is put together. And so once the regional superintendents come up with the 175 common days, then we have to work around that to determine when we can have in-service time. And that's why sometimes people will send us comments and suggestions, and we're always happy to review those, but we can't just substitute out other days for professional development or parent conferences if it interferes with the 175 that's part of that common commitment in the region. So we do have sort of limited flexibility once that regional calendar has been determined. But then obviously internally, we start looking at in-service days, and as part of Tom's cabinet, all the team gets together and we have opportunities to think about parent conferences, in-service at the beginning, end of the year, how we use town meeting. So that's where we have all those internal conversations. to Russ's point about early release days, so we have to be in school until 11:30 in order to count that as a student day. So that's what the AOE proposes as sort of a halfway mark of the day, knowing that depending on school start times, that's not perfect, but 11:30 is the time that we use. And if we're in school up until 11:30, we can count that as a student instruction day. Russ, were those the high points?
Yeah, I think so. Tom, did you have anything you wanted to add or clarify?
No, I think Stephanie did it. For those of you who don't know, I know most of you know Stephanie. Stephanie Phillips is our executive director for teaching and learning. So all the curriculum and instruction work of the district, as well as the directors of English, of our multilingual learners, our English learners team, and of our special education and student support services teams are part of Stephanie's office too. So Stephanie plays a major role and has done the calendar for a while, right, Stephanie? So
yes, I have.
Yeah, I'm learning the intricacies of the calendar. There are a lot of, it's different here than I've experienced before, just because of the connection to the sending and receiving CTE programs. But interested to hear what thoughts were about the calendar, because we do have some flexibility around some pieces of the calendar, and so I think it's important for us to hear. Generally speaking, we were not contemplating major changes to the calendar for next year. I gather there have been some conversations across the state to really radically change the way the calendar is structured. That's not something we're thinking about for next year, but I'm interested in hearing any and all thoughts about the calendar.
I'll start if no one else.
Great.
So I have kids, my kids have been in the district since kindergarten. They're now at BHS. And the one comment I'll make today is at any time you can avoid doing half days, don't do half days. I hate half days. They're totally disruptive. If you're a working parent, it's difficult. I don't feel like the kids never liked it. Like you can skip a half day and do a full day. Please do that.
Got it. That's good feedback. And we've done early release days, right? Do you feel the same way about the early release days where we're releasing an hour and
yeah, once we got into the hang of that, that was fine. I think that happened when the kids are still in elementary school, and that was, you knew that schedule. It wasn't a surprise. The half days that were just like randomly thrown in there, you know, half the time we were like in the morning, like, oh my God, what's happening today? I mean, I just didn't feel like it was productive all the way around. So.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll answer your question about the early release. That was a tough adjustment. My kids were in elementary school at that time. I hated it. You know, trying to like flex your daycare. I mean, that was really what it was about. You kind of have everything settled, like got, you know, the careful balance of when to school end and, you know, the childcare. And then you get this one random day a week when it's different and you have to figure that out. So that was challenging when I had kids who needed childcare.
Got it.
From a teacher perspective, they're not any fun either. If we're talking half days, generally because they're scheduled like before parent-teacher conferences. So generally you get kids at 8 o'clock and now you have them until noon and the schedule is all crazy and changed and you generally don't get any planning period or any break. And then you go and you have a half-hour lunch and then you do parent conferences till 8 o'clock at night. They're killer. So we don't like them either.
Got it. Good to know. I like the honesty too.
Yeah, that's what you get from me.
Thank you. Cool. What else?
I have a question. I think in middle school, they started doing, okay, here's the backup. I was surprised that BHS had parent conferences again this week. I'm guessing now that I think about it, it's maybe because we had 4 different teachers in the fall. I feel like they just barely got into school and now we have another like 5-6 days off essentially, you know. So that was a bit of a surprise. I appreciate parent-teacher conferences, but I would rather instruction time, but.
Yeah, no, I take that feedback. I think in retrospect, we may not have made the right decision there. We did decide in middle school to not do those days to preserve instructional time but with high school, because they had shifted, it's a whole new group of teachers, right? So that's that's why we decided to keep them there, because otherwise there may not be a connection at all. But I think parent-teacher conferences are important. I also think there are other ways to make connections. So sort of striking that balance.
Would you like some more honesty?
Yes, that's why we're here.
Okay. We have bounced parent-teacher conferences all over the calendar. They really, for teachers, as far as like when I'm going to talk to parents and really be able to give you information about your child, ones in October are really kind of useless because I don't know where they were for next year. I think they're in November, but we bounced them from October to that November time. I don't know your child well enough in October. I haven't assessed enough in October. I can't give you it takes me a quarter to really find out who your child is. So in November, we can have a much richer conversation. March is also another terrible time for a parent-teacher conference. I haven't done the next battery of like assessments, the common assessments that we have to do. Moving that towards the end of May or June is probably now we can have that conversation. Is your child, what do we need to think about to get your child ready for 7th grade? You know, what are the things we're going to be concerned about? We're talking about class selections, friends, the kinds of things that we need to talk about to make sure that everybody can launch successfully into the next year. So making sure that we're sort of really pushing those back so that we're most effective as we can be as we talk to parents.
Got it.
I think that transition at the end of, May, especially for 8th graders, like going into the high school, I think that would help parents feel more comfortable about class selection and what's happening. I think that's a great suggestion.
Great. Well, we're taking notes, Stephanie and I. Mine are mental. Stephanie's writing. Thank you.
I think the other struggle with parent-teacher conferences is, well, in Triple E, we do a great job of always being there to communicate with families, during pickup, during, drop off, whatever. So it's a little different for Triple E, but in working in the elementary schools, in a preschool, in an elementary school, I had a lot of experience working with my colleagues. And one of the struggles is just trying to get the liaisons and the translators. Those are days where everybody needs them and everybody wants them, and they're stretched so thin. And so at the preschool level, we actually try to meet with our parents on a day that's not a parent-teacher conference day, knowing that they're stretched so thin. So just a big shout out to the liaisons and putting that out in the view too.
Yeah, that's important. So maybe thinking about staggering them.
Yeah, because you think about then you might be asking a parent who is non-English speaking to take an additional day off work to come in for a parent-teacher conference, and then their students are also off on Thursday or Friday. So there might be an equity issue there too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stacy.
Other thoughts? Any thoughts on MLK Day, Indigenous Peoples Day? Do you all have thoughts on those days, or there's a couple other federal holidays that we don't, or one other that we don't take?
This is the first year I can remember that we've done Indigenous Peoples Day. We've traditionally not had that off as a day because we used to have 2 days off in October for the Vermont NEA conference. And then the Vermont NEA conference no longer happens and those days disappeared. And then we were talking in our group, and I don't know how, I know my scholars are pretty burnt out at that time because it's a long time from August to November without any kind of a break or days off. Indigenous Peoples Day is a wonderful one. Even if we could steal a day from the end of a vacation or something, I mean, I think teachers and students could use some kind of a break in October, 2 days, so that you just regroup. MLK Day is usually a half day, and I understand, and I think everybody gets very involved in the curriculum that we try to use on that day and the different curriculums. I just think that for many teachers, we're doing that as a constant, as opposed to today's MLK Day, we're gonna do that today. And it's once again, it's one of those, usually half my class is gone because parents have taken it as a vacation day because it's only a half day. I just think we might want to rethink that one a little bit. I don't have a suggestion. I just think we should rethink it.
Gail, were you gonna give some feedback?
Yeah, this is maybe one of those radical kinds of things that doesn't have to do specifically with the calendar. But one of the things that we benefited from having a high schooler and even a little bit the middle schooler is getting to sleep a little longer in the morning. And I know there's some districts around the country that have changed the time of day so that high schools start later. And it's just, I mean, there's all kinds of literature showing that that is better for their brains and safety in terms of driving in the morning. And there's a lot of benefits to shifting the schedule. And I just didn't know if that was something that was at all on the table in our district.
We haven't discussed it in my time here very much. I don't know, Stephanie, if that's been a big topic of conversation in past years.
The only context around late start, you know, pre-COVID was that we did have the 1 day a week. When we first started, it was Wednesday, and then it shifted to Friday for teacher PLC time. So there was 1 day where at K-8, we do an early dismissal. We did the late start at the high school. That's the only time that we've really discussed consistently the idea of a late start. There have been other conversations throughout the state in past years, although not real recently, but just around looking at offering different sort of like rolling schedules for students so that some courses could potentially be offered both early in the day and later in the day, and trying to think about that so that students could get courses they need, but not always be confined to sort of that 8 to 3, but that there might be courses that would start at 8 or even 7:30, but also courses that would go later in the afternoon. So a little bit of regional conversation several years ago, but mostly locally just around the late start for PLCs.
All right. Well, any other, thank you for that, Gail. That is definitely a conversation. When I was down in DC, Montgomery County was having major conversations, and that's a pretty big district down in the DC area. And I know that's you know, that's something that we should be talking about. So thank you for bringing that forward. And since I said we'd have a good 30 minutes for questions and answers, why don't, when we're down to 18 minutes, why don't we shift over to questions and answers? And if you have thoughts or ideas, send them my way. You can send me an email directly. If you have Stephanie's email, you can send them to Stephanie and me, or I can just forward them along to her, and we can talk about it, as we will be in the next couple of weeks here. We're looking to finalize the calendar in April. So that's the goal. All right, questions and answers, or thoughts, suggestions, feedback.
A question, if I'm not jumping the line, because I know I've taken some time. I've been seeing, there's an article in Digger about the weighted study and the stuff in the legislature, and I wondered if you had anything to share and offer us, if that's something that Burlingtonians need to get on.
Big time.
Did we do that? How do we do that?
Big time. So there's a lot of movement. So we have our school board has taken this on and has done some really, really amazing leadership work behind the scenes in the past few months to get a coalition of districts together to advocate at the State House for the weighted study to be taken up, for the state to take up the equalized pupil formula to create an equitable formula. So they have a lobbyist, and they're lobbying at the State House today. I get probably 15 to 30 emails a day from the coalition. It's an interesting coalition because so the premise, the problem is that there's an inequitable funding formula that has no empirical basis that we utilize in the district, and disproportionately underfunds districts with higher levels of poverty and more students with disabilities and more students who are English learners, and disproportionately overfunds districts that have higher income bases. And it's not actually, since the state doesn't give the funding, the communities determine the funding through voting on the budget proposals and property tax rates related to those budget proposals. What ends up happening is two things. What ends up happening is tax rates end up being higher than they need to be, and districts end up not having the resources that they need to have to support their students. So it's a double whammy for the community. And there was a study that was commissioned by the Agency of Education 2 years ago. Dr. Colby from the University of Vermont, but also people from the American Institute of Research, the AIR, and Rutgers University did a really thorough study and found that we have an inequitable funding formula that disproportionately impacts districts like ours, but also districts in the Northeast Kingdom, small districts that have high poverty that are rural. And so it's a big issue, and we need to really fight to fix it. And the fight is happening now. The advocacy, I should say, let's say advocacy is happening now, and the state is listening, and it's a little tenuous. So I would sort of reach out to your local representatives to let them know how they are with us, but they may be able to steer you in the right direction. I'd be writing to people about this. It's plainly inequitable, and everyone knows it.
And they're likely to take it up this year, or they're going to take it up next year, or we don't know yet?
They're taking it up now.
Can
today.
they put it off for next year, or they like?
They want to put it off. Well, we have a lot of support for this, but there are also lots of questions out there in the community about in the state about it, right? And districts fear that they're gonna lose, right? And that there will be winners and losers. The argument is that, and actually the Vermont Principals Association and the Vermont Superintendents Association have both spoken really clearly and about the need to take this up. So there has really wide interest, and they're saying they're making their stance on an equity format. So you really can't say you're for equity in Vermont and not support this, I don't think. Stacy.
Just a question. I was wondering, and maybe this is my first lunch with Tom, so maybe you've discussed it already, but any thinking about maybe trauma training related to the COVID year for staff and then for the school communities going forward, and also any extra school time for our students that have been unable to participate that might have fallen behind, any way to catch them up? I know that we have summer services, but those are pretty limited. So I wasn't sure if that had been addressed yet or not.
I just touched on it earlier. I haven't really addressed it. So thank you, Stacy, for the question. But it comes back to what I mentioned earlier around this recovery plan. So Executive Director Phillips, Stephanie here is working on that, is leading that plan for the district. And although we will all be involved, and that plan is the state is asking us for a plan around 3 areas: academic success, social and emotional and well-being and mental health, and engagement. And so, and we're getting funding to support this work. So those are going to be, I think, 2 areas, sort of clear areas where we will want to allocate some resources and do more than what we've done in the past. I think you've hit on 2 really important pieces. So I envision us, we're still we're still unpacking the toolkit. So they gave us a toolkit that describes this process on Friday. And so Stephanie and I and the team were digging through to sort of understand what that's telling us. But I think it's pretty safe to say that we will expand summer learning opportunities. There's a real desire here to also not make those wholly academic, right? So that, like, how do we also help students reconnect, the importance of reconnecting when there's been trauma, and reconnecting as a community, so that you're well and able to access rigorous curriculum, you know? So those are the things that yeah, we are thinking about those things, and I think you'll see that happen. Thank you, Stacy. Thanks for being here. Laura.
Just, has the state given you any indication? And I know we're waiting on CDC guidelines on 3-foot distances and 6-foot distances. And I know that the governor's intention is to get kids back in school, and I would be thrilled to have everybody back. But I also know that that's very different than just opening the doors and saying, come on in. We have a lot we would have to reorganize. Do we have any kind of time frame? Do we have any indication of what the thought is on that?
We don't have a good idea, but we have some indications that the guidance may shift to not require 6 feet distancing grades 6 through 12. And the governor has said a couple times that he's hoping that by April, or in the month of April, more students are back in person more than they are now. So it's kind of vague, you know, but we are getting these indications, right, that in April that could change. And I think we just saw Massachusetts shift from 6 feet to 3 feet. That was a big turn of events. Maine and New Hampshire have already been at 3 feet, and a bunch of European countries have been at 3 feet, and all those places that have been cited at 3 feet in some of the research that's coming out, which is all really preliminary, is that those schools have been really, really successful. And there hasn't been a big difference between the 3 feet and the 6 feet distancing among students. So the issue with us, as you know, is it's not only about distancing. It's about arrival, dismissal, lunch, recess. There's so many factors. And then at middle school, high school is a little, at middle school, it's about scheduling. So we would have to actually change the schedules in middle school, and that would be hard to do at the end of April. And it's a big lift, right? So the big question, I think, is how is it worth the really big lift it would take to get back more in person for if it ends up being the last month of school, or is it more worth our time to build out summer programming? And a lot of this really depends on, and we may end up having to do some of both. A lot of this depends on how soon we learn what the guidance changes will be, because I've asked the team, start thinking, like, imagine the guidance changes tomorrow. We have to be ready. We can't have the guidance change and then say, whoa, we've been waiting for the guidance to change, because we're hearing it may change. But we just don't have a lot of specifics about what that guidance will be. So we're starting to think about what it could look like to be back more in person. We have an MOU with the BEA that we did really collaboratively, and Dan Hagan and I have met to talk about that. Again, we haven't talked any specifics, just sort of like, let's start talking a little bit, you know, and so that has started to happen. I want to do it with our community and with our teachers and staff. I want to think about if families, I know I've heard from a lot of families who want to be back in person. One of the things that really pushed me a couple of weeks ago is I met with our multilingual liaisons and a group of Somali Bantu families, and they were and a group of Nepali families who said they really need to get back in school. And so, yeah, that's sort of the information I have. We do need to see what the guidance tells us. And what we're trying to do now is also anticipate that the guidance will say 3 to 6 feet, or we'll say 3 feet physical distance, and think about what else we would need to do to be prepared to be in person more.
So we could be told with 2 or 3 weeks notice, change your schedule, you're going. I mean, that's just, like I said, it's a huge lift. I mean, what would we do with algebra and band and Lit and intervention. I mean, all of our teachers are teaching remotely. Just it's almost mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is pretty. It's overwhelming to me personally to think about. And actually, I have probably the least of the work, right? Because I would tell the principals, hey, you gotta, and we've talked about you have to kind of figure it out how it would work at your school. And it's really even more challenging for our high school, I think, because they've just come back. And there's been a big adjustment there. So there's just a lot to consider here. It's very much high on my radar. And I understand there are a lot of people. I understand, number one, everyone wants to be back in person. And I also understand that there are a lot of people who are worried about being back in person really quickly, in person more really, and doing that really fast and not doing well. So that's where we are. Not a straight answer. I wish I had a straighter answer, but I don't.
Thanks.
Kelly.
Hi. Will those that are remote be able to finish out the year remote?
Yes. So we are gonna, if we did switch to more in person, let's say like if it was at elementary school, I think we would have to keep a remote option. Yes. Okay. We would be able to expand our remote option, but we would have to keep the remote option, which is part of the balance. We are staffed really on a balance right now because of the number of people who can't be at work and the number of people who are remote. In terms of how we're staffed to run the district, we're kind of running two school systems right now with the same number of staff. So we're really kind of balanced on the knife's edge right now, and we just have to be mindful of that as we make decisions. All right, we have a few minutes left. Any last thoughts or questions? Well, it's great to see you all. Thank you for being here. We're doing a little thinking about whether we keep this every other week at the same time, or if we shift days or maybe shift times a little bit. One of the every other week meetings. So I guess stay tuned on that. And we also realize this is just one opportunity for engagement, right? So we're creating a lot of different opportunities for me to engage with the community, for our schools to engage, to reach out and engage communities. So this is one more opportunity, but we are thinking about maybe shifting up time a little bit, although we've been really happy with the turnout. I'm very happy with the number of people who are here today. To me, it feels perfect. We've had this turnout or a little bit bigger on other days. So again, thank you for being here, and feel free to send thoughts, ideas, feedback my way. My email address is tflanagan, TFLANAGAN @bsdvt.org. We also have a superintendent account. Russ monitors that superintendent account, and I respond to some of those, and some of those are sort of district-wide responses. But I want you to know I'm accessible and available to you either way. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, why Brett? Oh, she left. Hi, Diana.